Welcome to the Cheer Athlete. Today I have with me Susan Averna, who is the coach of Trinity College in Connecticut. And Susan and I actually have a few connections that, not that we haven't met actually, but my biggest exciting thing is that we cheered in the same field, I think, around the same time back in the day. And then I also coached at Holy Cross. So I think that that's like super awesome. So welcome to the show, Susan. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's let people get to know you a little bit and tell us your background in cheer and how you got to where you are today.
Okay. I started cheering when I was 10 years old for a rec program in my hometown. And I continued through junior high and high school and then into college at Holy Cross, which is where one of our connections is. And I started coaching when I was 15 in high school in the same rec program that I had participated in. So I did that through high school. And in fact, I was just reflecting on that and thinking about how I used to have practice from 2:30 to 5, and then I'd run up the hill and coach from 5 to 7, and how crazy but fun that was. And then I coached again. Okay, so I have a master's in counseling. So when I was in graduate school, I worked in a small private school in Boston as part of my internship for a counseling degree. And they needed a cheer coach at the time. So I kind of just slid into that position at 23 years old. We can talk a little more about, what we learn over the years as a coach and a novice coach versus an experienced coach. But that was really fun. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a great time with those kids, and I'm still in touch with most of them today. And then I took a long time off from coaching because I was either working full time or in school full time, and because I went on to get another degree. And I returned to coaching, I don't know, it was probably around 15 years ago at the high school in the town where I now live. So I did that for many years. I actually, when I moved here to West Hartford, I'm in central Connecticut now, I immediately started teaching at Trinity. And I looked into being an assistant coach there, and I called up the AD and he said, yeah, we don't have a program. So we'll talk a little more about that too, how the NESCAC League that isn't really strong in cheer yet. We hope yet. Right. And so instead I coached at the high school in my town for several years, loved that, built that program to be very strong. And then when I stepped away from that, it was a few years where I got the itch again. I just missed it. I think you know this. It's not something that's easy to walk away from. And so around 2020, some students at Trinity created a cheer club, which was just a handful of kids. And then a couple of years later, they were able to get it to be a club sport. And that's when they brought me on as a coach. So awesome. Last year was my first year, and now I'm in my second season at Trinity.
That's incredible. That's first of all, the longevity of that, I can't even imagine coaching anymore. I loved it when I was doing it, but I'm removed from it now. So I can't picture that. And I'm on a different side of it, but to continue to grow and building a program from scratch, that's huge. Yeah.
It's so fun. And we'll get into that too.
So what changes have you seen from, I mean, this is kind of an obvious question, but things are very different from when we started cheering to now. In the coaching aspect, let's dive into what you were talking about, as a young coach to now, how are things different, and what kind of changes are you seeing there?
Well, no, the sport obviously is very different. It's so much more athletic, and the skills are so much more difficult. The hardest skills we were doing when I was a college cheerleader are some of the easiest things that we do now. In terms of coaching, I've taken it upon myself to educate myself. I don't know that there's more and more now. For you, for instance, I follow you and people who really have the knowledge about how to be strong and develop those skills and develop the fundamentals of functional movement in order to get the skills safely. So I think now there's a lot more resources if you look for them, but there's still not a ton of training per se on how to coach cheer. I don't think there is. There's not as much as there should be anyway. And so what's changed for me, I think this is true across sports, and I could be wrong, but my take on it is people come into coaching after a love of the sport that they played, and typically they emulate how they were coached, unless they really objected to something, and then they might go in the complete other direction. But I don't know that there's a lot of training on coaching per se. So coaches come in with varying levels of skill in the sport, sometimes great skill in the sport, but there's almost no personal development aspect to being in that leadership in that role and managing and having those relationships. And that is kind of the bread and butter of what I do generally as a psychologist. So I've been able to take the personal development work that I've done for myself and apply it in all of the roles that I have. But I also provide workshops and trainings to educators of all sorts, including athletic coaches, on how to do that, practice those self-reflective and self-awareness skills so that they can show up better for their team and model that for the young people that they're coaching. So that's where I see it should be going. I don't know that a lot of coaches have access to that kind of support. I'm sure that many do. And some people just naturally are good at it. They're just born to be good leaders, good coaches, and it's part of their makeup. But I don't know that that's true across the board. And you still see some coaches doing some things that are just not beneficial for the people in their charge. My husband just recently started reffing, and he was reffing a middle school basketball game last night, and it was very exciting and very intense. It was middle school, but he was telling me how one of the coaches was just screaming and swearing at his players, and I thought, there it is right there, like that. You're still seeing a lot of that even at the youth level, that's something that needs to be changed. So so I'm always sort of trying to do the self-improvement thing personally, and as a teacher, as a professor, as a coach. But I also look at it as what I'm doing is in those moment-to-moment interactions. That's where the powerful change happens. It's not so much what you say or any sort of blanket statements that you make about who you are as a team. It's really what happens moment to moment in those practices and games, and how you're reacting, what you're modeling, all of that, to really shore up those relationships, but also you're giving them an example of what it could be. And those skills kind of transfer over into all of their relationships, I hope.
Yeah, I think as a coach, like you touched on, like we learn our skills from our coaches and parents and everything. And then that carries over but it's more than just our coaching style. I think our athletes will learn from us on how to react to stressful situations and how to organize your schedule. And
that's exactly. I was thinking back, I think I did an okay job as a 23-year-old first-time head coach. However, I wasn't far from perfect. And because I was a counselor in the school, and I don't know how much you know about therapy and counseling and that kind of thing, but one of the first things you learn is not to have dual relationships. So if you have a client as someone that you are counseling, you shouldn't also have a different kind of relationship with them, whether they be your student or a colleague or whatever, a friend. But that happens a lot actually in schools, because school counselors will often coach sports. So there is sort of that there can be that friction. And so what happened was I was hired Well, I was brought in to do the internship, and then I was hired that summer to be the head coach. And so I started practices the week before school started. And I had a group of, I don't know, 15 or so kids. And one girl was just giving me a really hard time. And I don't even remember the specifics anymore, but she was sort of mouthing off. She was, pushing the authority, because I was only about 5 or 6 years older than these kids too. So she was giving me a really difficult time, and I had no idea how to handle that at 23. I just had no idea. So I was reactive, and I gave her some warnings, and I ultimately said, get out, you're done. And so she left the practice. And a week later, I start the internship, and I'm doing individual counseling, group counseling, and a bunch of other things. And I get my list of individuals that I'm counseling, and she's on it. So as a counselor, you want the rapport to be there. There's nothing can about that. And I thought, oh no, I'm what am I going to? Anyway, the short version is we met, we talked. I acknowledged, my reactivity and that I didn't handle that well. She acknowledged, and we talked a little bit about why she was doing that in the first place. And we ended up healing that, repairing that. And she actually came back for winter cheer and was a great kid. And I enjoyed her very much. But what my point in saying this is, at 23, I had no idea what to do with that. Now, years later, sure, I would know exactly what to do with that. And I would hope to be able to manage my own reactivity in the moment to do its best for the relationship and for that student. And I think that's just stuff that you do get with experience, but also I think there needs to be support, because not everyone's just going to pick that up through doing. There needs to be some coaching of the coaches. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge need. And I wish there was something, I wish that was available to me as a coach, or when I was a coach, because I went through a very similar situation with a girl. I'd been coaching her for a while, and I didn't have a outside coaching relationship with her, but the same kind of reactive. And it was over and over, and I just blew up and was like, you're done, and then we talked after, and I had actually left partly because of that. And I realized how I needed to react differently. And I think that we talked, personal development and like looking and like doing your own work. I didn't start that until after I finished coaching, and kind of like, because I was 20 years old, and I was into my 30s when I was coaching, but I didn't really pay attention to any of that and like learn. And I had access to that, I've always been very spiritual and kind of like introspective, and but I kind of put that aside for my college years and into my beginning professional career. And then now, as I in the last 15 years, I'm looking back and thinking, oh, I could have handled that differently, and how would I react now? And I think that's, you're right, we don't get we emulate what we see. To some extent, we may learn from that. But in a coaching realm, learning how to communicate that and how to do that effectively and practicing it, I think would be hugely helpful, because how do you learn it except for trying it? Like we teach our cheerleaders, you have to do it over again. What you put out there on the field is what you're going to do on the competition floor. What you do in practice is what you're going to do on the field. And if we don't practice that, it doesn't come naturally. So,
we're human too as coaches, so we're going to mess up, even if you've done the work and you are a reflective person. But I think that in the repair of it, if you walk away from a practice saying, wow, I didn't handle that well, or, I shouldn't have said that thing, you have the opportunity to go back the next practice, or maybe even that night, give them a call and repair it. And I think that lesson is just as important as not being reactive, is in showing how, okay, I can make a mistake and we can repair this and our relationship can still be great. And that is a life lesson too, that I think a lot of kids need to see modeled for them, because they might not see that modeled in their home or in relationships. So I was just thinking last year, and this is kind of minor compared to the other one, but last year I was at a practice, and again, don't remember the details that much, but one of my girls was upset with me because I don't think she liked what she was doing in the routine or something. There was something she took issue with. And she kind of mouthed off to me and was rude and disrespectful. And my initial reaction was anger, but I was like, no, I'm not going to engage right now because, one, I don't want to react out of anger, but also it would detract from the practice. And so I'm going to talk to her at the end of practice when I've had a chance to kind of cool down on this. And so I just took a deep breath. We continued the practice. About a half an hour later, we took a water break. She came over to me and apologized. And that I was so grateful for not having that reaction, because I don't know where it would have gone, but I think we would have gotten into something versus both of us just taking a moment. And I was so happy to see, and I, really expressed appreciation to her for owning it and apologizing. And so I think that we really have a lot of power that can be used for good in the coach role. And, but we also need support.
Yeah.
To do. Mm-hmm.
Because when I was coaching, I would take my kids to cheer camp, and they would have some coaching classes. Like we'd go in for, I don't even know, an hour, 2 hours. And they would talk legalities and some, safety, like making sure there's mats and that kind of stuff, which has come up. Like, I think that made a big change as a rule, like as a global, that, at least in Massachusetts, the state, requires mats and if you're cheering at a basketball game, you have to have a mat if you're going to do any 2-level and tosses and all that stuff. So I think that was helpful, but there wasn't a lot of coaching skills. It was all technique, and it was, how to spot and all that, which definitely very helpful. Do you today, and over the course of the last, has that, are you finding that education, or not, maybe, obviously not the personal development stuff, but has it changed at all in the last 20 years?
A little, but I think, they state, I can't speak to what's being done everywhere because I've been to only a limited sort of coaching conferences, but they talk about the important things, but I don't think there's enough time to get into it. And there's really no way to practice it and come back. So there's no mentorship. There's no reflective aspect to that. So they might talk about the importance of the relationship. I hear this on different podcasts too. I'll hear coaches talk about the relationship's everything. It is. Right. And what are you going to, what does that look like? How do you do that? That's the piece that tends to be missing. So you can make the statement of how important it is to model certain behavior, but it's the acting it out and the actual execution of it that's not really supported. And I think it's hard to do that at a one-day conference where you're just having an hour with. So I've done that work. I've been brought in to different people, usually in the cheer and dance world more than anywhere. Although I recently just spoke to our football team, and I'm willing to talk to any coach about coaching in general, even if I'm not invested in that specific sport. But yeah, I'm thinking about when I first coached at the high school here. We have a 45-hour training that's mandated by the state if you're in a public school. Yeah. And it's pretty good training, and it covers the important physical things, I think. It covers concussion training and management, first aid, of course, that sort of stuff. And there's some skill building, and there's a little bit of psychology, but it is sorely, it needs to be, let's just say. That was 10 years ago or 15 now when I did it. But so that there's a recognition that it's important. It's just who's going to do it. Yeah. And like I said, I've been doing this work with educators for a long time, classroom teachers, primarily K-12, some at the college level. And all this stuff translates beautifully into coaching. It's just, where do they access it? Do they even want to access it? Right. That's something I feel like that should be mandated, because, well, maybe it should, but it's not effective when someone is forced to go to a training where they're not interested in looking deeply into themselves. Right. And who they are and how they are with others. But I do enjoy the work very much for people who are motivated to do that and know that it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that comes across into the physical, the aspect of, we'll say cheerleading, but anything, any client I work with, like if they're invested into doing the work and they're invested, I can always tell when someone comes to see me, I'm like, why are you here? The doctor sent me.
Right.
They're, they're not quite there yet to like really take ownership and like do the work to feel better. And vice versa, the people that come in, they're like, can't do this anymore, and I want to be able to do this, and I have this, and I'm willing to do what it takes. I mean, they don't usually say I'm willing to do what it takes, but you can just tell that if you're invested in they're choosing to come and to do the work, they get better so much faster. They exceed their goals more than the people that are just coming and saying, oh, doctor sent me because I have to be here, and it's a chore.
It is.
Um,
And the one way around that I found is that if you can hook it into what's important to the person, then you can sometimes get them there. So if I'm talking about these things that they might see as kind of fluffy and whatever, not important to coaching, if I can tie it back into, well, you're going to see, peak performance in your athletes, well, then now I may have their attention. But yeah, they really need to kind of want to do it. And it's not something that can be forced.
Yeah. How do your, let's talk a little bit about like recruiting wise and like, so now you're developing a program and doing that, like, what are the challenges and what have you implemented? And a question I keep seeing, and it's popping up all the time now, is how do I get my kids in front of these cheer coaches to get recruited? And
Yeah,
I know.
Struggling with too. So I'll just paint a picture of what D3 NESCAC looks like first, because there's some unique challenges there. I don't know that it's D3 in particular, because I know that there's some really strong D3 programs out there, really strong. So Trinity is part of the New England Small College Association, NESCAC, and those schools tend to be very rigorous. They're hard to get into. And so you got to kind of really have it together to even walk in the door. So, and because for Trinity in particular, there's only 3 schools within the whole league that have cheerleading. Oh. And that is us, that we are fairly new. Wesleyan, who's had a program for, I'm not sure how long. I'm friendly with their coach. They're right down the road from us. And then Tufts, which again, I don't know how long they've been in existence, and I've never met the coach or even seen the team in person because we don't typically travel to each other. Right. So there's that issue right there, that it's not even across the league. And I could recruit, I suppose, but they also have to be able to get into the school. So there's that aspect. I don't know that we're at a point right now where people are coming to Trinity to cheer. They're not like thinking, oh, where can I cheer? And then, starting with that. But this program has grown exponentially in terms of skill and size in a very short period of time. So I do think that we're starting to get noticed. We're definitely more noticeable and respected on campus. I have tons of people coming up to me all the time, complimenting us. We're involved in a lot on campus. In terms of, we cheer the football and basketball games. We do compete locally. And we will a lot of times just be at admissions events or other things that we've been invited to kind of have a presence for. So we've gotten a lot of traction on campus. So the students that are, I'm getting just kids who email me who are already there, who want to come on. The tricky thing for me, is to kind of get more noticeable outside of Trinity so that people know we have a cheer program. And it's interesting because when I started, I think there were, I want to say, there wasn't many. There was only 6 students. And then when I basically held an open clinic, I didn't even have tryouts the first year. It was like, if you can, if you're walking, talking and breathing and you want to cheer, come. Yeah. And I did hold the clinic in the sense that, there were skills that were taught that we were going to be doing. And some people self-eliminated based on that. But for the most part, I had about 16 kids come out that first spring. Some didn't continue, and then more came out in the fall. So we had 16 the first year, and it was a really wide range of skill and experience, from a couple superstars who had done either a high competitive high school or all-star to no experience at all, zero. And I know that you'll agree with this. It doesn't really matter so much whether they've cheered before, but it does matter if they have the strength and body awareness to be able to pick up the skills safely and quickly. And so I have a girl right now who's phenomenal, and she was recruited to Trinity for basketball and then decided she didn't want to play basketball. And now she's cheering, and never cheered before, but great anyway, because she's strong, athletic. She knows what it means to be on a team. And she's got all the raw material that you want to see to develop an athlete.
Yeah.
I see these other programs that we compete with in the state. I think they're either D1 or D2, actually, I'm not sure. I was looking at their recruiting flyer, and the standards just to walk in the door for tryout, not even to make the team, but to try out, you had to have a round off back handspring back tuck and a standing back tuck. I thought, well, how can I possibly compete with that?
Right.
When I have kids coming in who've never tumbled, they've never jumped, so a lot come with dance experience, but that even varies widely.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time getting them strong, starting from the very basic stuff and, progressing them slowly. But even so, I've been really impressed with where they started and how far we've come in just 1 year and now one more season. And I have no seniors right now. So I have the entire team returning unless they choose not to, and then some. So I think we're going to be really strong in the next few years. So yeah, I would love to hear about how to begin to recruit. We are going to be exhibitioning at a competition about an hour from here, just to, and primarily it's a high school competition, but they've invited some colleges to exhibitions. So we're going to do that. But yeah, when I see like the combines and things happening, I'm thinking, oh no, I guess I should be going to those. I would, I have kids reaching out through Instagram now because we have an Instagram presence. So we're getting some traction, but we're only in year 2. So, it's a work in progress for sure. But I will say that the kids that I have are just really great people, and we have a lot of fun together. They work hard. And so it's a great group to join. And we're still at the point where if you've always wanted to cheer, there's still a possibility you could do that. Yeah. I mean, I'm making cuts now. I'm at the point where when we have tryouts, I do make cuts. Yeah. But you don't have to be a superstar. You just need to have some basic skills and strength and potential. And so I guess that's a good thing for students who might otherwise not make a team that requires a standing back tuck and round up back handspring back tuck to try out. Yeah. Yeah.
I think with the surgence of all-star programs and TV shows that are showing the eliteness of it, and hopefully the Olympics that it's, happening. I think a lot of I don't think it's all parents, and I don't think it's just parents, but looking at that, I understand how they're looking, and it's cool that there's combines now, and those are I think they're probably for the bigger schools. Having coached at a school with the same, it was really hard to get into, and the kids would come to me, they're like, I don't want to cheer anymore. I don't want to. I'm done. I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway though is like there's a lot of schools like put your edge. It's easy to say I'm not your parent and whatever, and I'm not the coach right now, but like pick your school first.
Yes.
And, unless, I mean, if your sole mission in life is to cheer at Worlds and be in the Olympics, like, okay, like I understand you're going to kind of gear that a little bit. But if there's a lot more to college and life after cheerleading that, like, if you still want to be involved in and be a part of a team, make friendships and connections, like
Mhm.
there's so many programs out there that may not be the elite level yet, or even, but it's just you can start to be a part of that program and like you said, develop athleticism, keep healthy, develop good skills, get into a good routine, and develop these personal relationships like that. It doesn't, maybe look at the school, see if they have a cheer program. If they don't, maybe start a cheer program, like your kids did. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options out there other than just try, where can I get them recruited and what do I need to do for that?
Well, for me personally, I value their health and wellness over everything. So that means that translates into the safety of what we're doing on the mat, but it also means their mental well-being. And I think I'm at an advantage as being a professor there because I know exactly what the rigor of the school is. I know what the demands are. I know that these kids, a lot of them work in addition to their coursework and their clubs and things like that. So I'm trying to balance having a good commitment, a reasonable amount of practice time that we can continue to get better, but also recognizing all the demands that they have on them. And so I think I strike a good balance with that. But we have conversations with it a lot. And in fact, I spoke to them around midterm, and especially my first years who may not know what they're in for. And I said, look, I will be flexible to some degree as try to navigate this, but don't come to me the night before or the night of a practice and say, I have a paper due tomorrow that I haven't started yet. That's not okay. Like you need to maybe stay in the weekend before
Right.
and budget your time. So I'm always willing to mentor and talk to them, counsel them on how to handle all of this. But I also have to keep the standards pretty high. But at the end of the day, I'm a psychologist, I'm a professor, and I'm probably going to let them leave early to get that paper done if push comes to shove, because I don't want to see them fail in that way. And they know that there's a lot of things that are not excused, but academics is one. If something comes up that's obviously going to take priority over the practice or whatever. So yeah, it's been really good and challenging to wear all those different hats though. So which one do you pull on the most in any given moment? Are you coach that has to look out for the entire team, but also caring for that individual and what they might need in that moment? And that's kind of what makes it fun for me, because
Yeah.
it's always interesting and challenging. I'm never bored
Yeah.
doing, and I get bored really easily. So that really says something that I'm always kind of thinking and planning. And we're in an interesting place right now because I'm very much a planner. I like to have things set. I tell them at the beginning of the fall what our practice schedule is going to be, and it's not going to change unless it's out of my control. It's not going to change, so that they can commit, so that they can work their work schedules and other things around it if they choose to. But we're in an interesting thing right now because they're tearing down, or they already have torn down our practice gym. And they're building a gorgeous multi-million facility in its place, which will be amazing in 2 years. But spring semester and all of next year, we've been displaced.
Yeah.
And I'm anticipating a very wonky practice schedule when I go back, which is out of my control right now because we're sharing space now with all the varsity teams. And it's a challenge for me because I like to know what's going to happen, and I like to be able to tell them what's going to happen. And all I keep saying is, I don't know. We'll see. And again, it's that modeling. That's life, right? So I have to model for them. I can get tied up in knots, or I can try to be flexible and roll with it. And let's just respond the best we can and get it done. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to model for them. and I think it's going to be fine. So we're gonna see. I have 2 competitions scheduled and maybe very little practice time, but it's that, it's going to be what it's going to be this year. And
that's, when you want to give them everything and the space and like make sure that they have all the other aspects that all the other sports have. It's hard to step back and be like, this is what it is, and for the greater good, it's going to be better in the long run. And, sorry, it's very hard to do that. But that is a life lesson that, think because we very frequently get displaced, you have to change locations on where you're cheering, or maybe like we used to practice before they rebuilt the Hart Center, the racquetball courts that, you couldn't run a routine full out. You could do stunts and you could build pyramids, but you really couldn't run a routine full out because there's no space, and you could have 2 mats in there,
right.
And so that's how I grew up in college. Like we would either be in the racquetball or we'd be outside, or like we in our little niche of, a nook of space to practice in. So for me, I was like, whatever, just roll with it. But I think people which is a good thing. They're used to having like, this is your designated space, and that's going to, but like you said, it's going to be for the greater good in general for your whole team and in the long run.
Yeah. And it'll be fine, because, you got to take the wide view. And I think I'm old enough and experienced enough to do that. So I'm the one to do it and help them to do it, because they're, focused in on whatever they're focused in on. And I have to think, this is not, in the grand scheme, is not a big deal. And it'll be. So, but I have to remind myself that sometimes too, because I'm also competitive and I want my time on the mat. And, you can't just move those mats to another room.
Exactly.
Right. So, but I'm grateful to have the space when we have it, and I'm grateful to have the mats. And so that's where I'm going to try to stay focused.
That's cool. Yeah. I don't want to spend a lot of time on injury wise and that, but like, I know you and I had talked some about, access to trainers and, strength and conditioning staff, and how do you manage, injuries. How has that worked, and are you finding, how have the injuries changed in the last, not in the 20 years, because that's old, but just since your time coaching and as a team has grown and progressed, having a strength and conditioning program in place and doing work to build the strength. Talk to us more about what you're seeing on injury wise and how you manage that, all the stuff.
Yeah, I think that there's some kids that come in with their vulnerabilities, and if I know what those are, I know how to tailor more the training and the strength and conditioning to them. I've really taken it upon myself to educate myself as much as possible. A lot of it was for my own well-being, because I had my own cheer injuries, but I also had other things predating cheer where I really shouldn't have even been cheering, probably. But we didn't know this. This was the 70s and 80s. So I've worked closely with a PT over the last 10 years to get myself stronger and better. And I've done a lot of other types of trainings, again, for my personal health, but that I use now. And then I follow people like you who, really know what they're doing, and I can either get validation for that, okay, I'm doing this correctly, I'm going about this the right way, or I learn something new and I incorporate that. So, all of our practices begin with, a dynamic warm up, and we're doing a lot of functional movement. We do strengthening at the end, or sometimes mixed in, depending on what's happening at practice that day. Because I know, as much as we talk about them doing it outside of practice, I know that they don't have a lot of time to do that. So I incorporate it in every practice. In terms of injuries, I would say the biggest risk right now are concussions, because these stunts are just, even if you know exactly what you're doing, you progress it slowly and safely. At some point, you have to go to the next level. And that's where I find the risk is. It's just like, you got to try it once. You can always correct, but you got to try it that first time. And, you can try to prepare everyone as much as possible for all the potential outcomes of it. You can have all the spotters in the world, but someone might get kicked in the head, or it might fall and not get caught the way you hope. And so that's what I've seen. I haven't had a ton of injuries. I had a few this year, a few that were preventable, and that I was like, man, that should not have happened. Others that were kind of run of the mill. These are things that happen no matter what you do, they're going to happen. It's been challenging because we don't have access to trainers. And I understand why we don't. We are a club sport, not a varsity sport, and they service all the varsity sports. And if we were also included in that, so would club soccer and all the other clubs. So I understand why it is. It's just a little concerning to me that there's no go-to place on campus for support for that. I mean, they can go to the health center, of course, and then they're going to get referred out to a hospital area or an urgent care. And the biggest concern for me is I feel like if there was an acute injury, I would know what to do with that. I could get them the help, the immediate help and follow up. But in terms of concussion, there's no one to really manage that return to play protocol. And when I was a high school coach, there was, because the trainers did that. Yeah. They would seek out a doctor first. They'd be seen by them, and then they would be followed up for however long it took with the return to play. And that we don't have in place. Yeah. And so I really need to, I've discussed it. I'm friends with some of the trainers, so I've discussed it with them, and they've definitely given me names and people who can do that because their hands are tied. It's not that they don't want to help. It's that, liability of who they can help. Right. So that's becoming, I understand what I need to do. It's not as great as it should be. And I think that's in part because cheer still has this, among people who aren't familiar, they still think, well, what do you need a trainer for? What are you doing? Dancing on a sideline. It's like, actually, no, that's not what we're doing. And so we're kind of in the middle. It's like there are people who get it, but the pieces are not in place either. And I know that that's different at different schools. Certainly if you're at a high-powered D1 cheer program, you're going to have access to strength and conditioning coaches and trainers and all the things. But that is not the case in a lot of schools, including mine. So that's another hat I wear. It's like, sort of, how can I be preventative and keep them safe? And then, God forbid, something does happen. Now I need to help them to get the services they need to be well again. Yeah, it's a lot. It's
a lot of hats to wear on that, and you have some medical background from the psychology end of it, and that knowing, okay, at least get the basic assessment and like, something's not right, but a lot of people don't have that. And I don't know enough on all-star stuff, but my perception, even at high school competitions, I don't know that I think they require to maybe have an EMT there, or an athletic trainer, but I think in a school system, whether it's college or high school or grade school, like, I think there's more awareness that, like, oh yeah, you need to get cleared before you come back than there is in an all-star program. And that's my perception. Call me out if I'm wrong. And I think it's probably not across the board. Having an athletic trainer on site doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop an injury or stop a concussion from being worse. It just it's a first line of defense. Right. And having access there. We can easily refer kids to.
I have that training, but I wasn't given that through Trinity. I wasn't required to have it, which is interesting. I was required at the high school level. I'm not required here, but I'm glad I had it. I actually renewed it through the state right before I took this job because I wanted to, and I wanted to be as up to date as I could be on first aid, safety, concussion, all of that. Yeah. And I'm pretty conservative in terms of the stunting and safety. There are stunts. I was actually just watching a team, and there's a common stunt I see being done all the time. I'll never do it. I'll never teach it because I just see too much potential for harm, even if they do it well. And so that's just who I am as a coach. I have lifelong injuries and chronic pain, some from cheers, some from just things that have happened to me in my life. I don't want that for them. So if I see someone who's got, a shoulder injury that's not responding to treatment, they're not going to be basing until they can move it in a way that, is safe, not just now, but into the future.
Yeah.
So, and they know this about me, and I care about them. And I think occasionally they might feel held back, but I don't think so. I think more generally, they're appreciative that I'm not just saying, hey, just go for it. We can do it. Try it. And taking those risks for injury and even the repetitive use injury stuff, I'm very mindful of. So, I mean, I don't have a degree of education or awareness that you do, but I'm pulling on people like yourself to make sure I'm, aware of these things.
Well, I applaud you, because I don't think that happens a lot. Or I think it's growing. I think a lot of people are starting to be more aware. And like you said in the beginning, like there are some things that are unavoidable. There's a level like you can progress, and then you have to take the risk.
Right.
And injuries are going to happen. You can walk across the street and sprain your ankle. Like it happens. But if you're prepared, and if and the return to play is a big aspect, that, are you getting back in too soon? And that's even, as a physical therapist, I'm like, I want you to get back in as soon as possible. Like I want, and sometimes there's some injuries like ACL reconstructions, like there's a time frame, and the kids, not in the kids, but the professional athletes that go back early, like number one, they have training 24/7. That's all they're doing is training. Number two, they're very strong. And number three, they also are still at a higher risk of injury and re-injury because of that. And likely they do get re-injured and have another catastrophic injury on top of that. So I don't think people recognize that. And when I have to hold somebody back, I'm always cringing, because I'm like, I want you to be back too. But sometimes it's for your greater good. And if you can do this now, you're going to be better in the long run. And so kudos for recognizing that, and like taking, because cheer coaching is a big, you're with them for a short period of time, but you can give them lifelong lessons and goals that help them throughout their life. And probably you and I definitely recognize that from my coach and the kids that I've coached. And so, I think that's a huge piece in like.
Yeah. And when I go back to high school and college, those are the best memories, hearing memories. And that's what I want these kids to remember. I want them to think back fondly. One of the things I did a while ago is I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training. Again, it was mostly for my own edification and so I could do it myself. But I worked that in, and it's interesting to see how much I learned there. And it was a really great program. It was taught by a PT and an OT, so they had a really good background in anatomy. And I draw on that a lot now, because I see PTs and other functional movement people doing these exercises. And I'm like, oh, that's actually just this in yoga. So it all wraps together. And I really like to educate my kids on why they're doing it a particular way and why they wouldn't do it this other way. So it's more motivating for them to do it correctly and have the right form, but also so that they can understand their bodies better, and they know where to find that edge, and they know when to slow it down or back off. And so that's a big piece too of what I'm hoping they'll learn from this. So there's just so much, and it makes it so fun. But it's a lot.
Right. What advice, like, do you have either 1 to 5 pieces of advice for coaches on how to incorporate this stuff into their coaching? Because it can be a lot and overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't already have the knowledge, then there's so many resources online now. But I love that your niche is cheer, because that's rare. So seek out people like Laura and really begin to incorporate it into the daily practice. And I think with I've always worked with teens and young adults in every role I've had. And one thing I know is they like to learn about their brains and bodies. So, really kind of teaching them that will go a long way in helping them to understand why they're doing what they're doing and be motivated to keep it up. I mean, we break for a really long time over the winter. I haven't seen them now in 3 weeks, and it's going to be another 3 weeks before I do. And, we talked a lot. We're going to try to Zoom together and work out. And I've put together different programs that they can do throughout the break. But it's really up to them to stay motivated and come back with the same strength and endurance that they had when they left, because we pick up right away and we compete in 5 weeks. So there's no time to build it back.
Right.
In fact, we compete 1 week really, because we're doing an exhibition a weekend. So it's kind of insane, but I trust they're invested. So I trust that they'll do it.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't know how to necessarily if we hadn't spent that time throughout the fall and in the practices going over various exercises and the proper form, and why you're doing this and why do this before that, and why always a dynamic warm up before, and why the static stretches should be at the end. And all the reasons for doing it in that way will help them to then, when they want to put together their own little workout throughout the week, they'll know the pieces and how they fit together. Was my goal anyway. And I think we got there. I guess we'll see on 23rd or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Where they left is I did another assessment. It wasn't really a tryout kind of thing, but it was more from my own feedback, is where were they at in certain skills and strength, so that I sit down with each of them and say, okay, you're pretty good here. Here's where I feel like, you're going to need to do the work. And this is where to start. So I'm pretty good at giving, again, because of the yoga teacher training, I'm really good at giving modifications. I don't want them all doing a V-up or something. If they have no core strength, you're going to pull your back and all kinds of things. Right. So I am able to look at them and say, you want to challenge yourself, but you don't want to be injuring yourself, and now you're set back. So I think they have a pretty good understanding of what that means, of where to meet themselves, where they're at on any given exercise or part of the body that needs to be worked with. So, yeah.
I applaud you tremendously, because I think that's a huge gift for anyone to start to learn what, and give them the okay that they don't need to be advanced as they start, and that they build a foundation, and it's gonna build. You can do so much more when you have a solid foundation, and that's huge.
Yep.
I can't wait to hear how that goes when they come back, and I'll reach out and ask you, find out where you're competing, and if I can make it down there, I would love to come down and see you compete and cheer you on.
Thank you.
If people want to reach out to you either about Trinity or any of your the coaching programs that you do for coaches and athletes in general, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so at Trin, if you want to email me, my Trinity email is susan.averna, Averna, at trincol, TRINCOLL.edu. So that will always reach me. I have an Instagram page that will be getting built up more in the near future around the coaching stuff, actually, is where I'm going to be focusing it. But that's, what is that? It's Susan_Averna. And our team page, if there's any athletes out there that are interested in checking out the program, we have quite a bit on our team page, and that is at Trincol, so TRINCOLL cheer. And so you can find us there. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's more of the professional stuff. That's more of I've written a book. So that's
awesome.
Wrote a book for educators. I always forget that. 2 years ago now, 2021. I had been doing a bunch of professional development for educators. It's completely applicable to coaches, although I'm in the process of writing one that is specific for coaching and athletes now too. But That one is called Witness and Wonder, Resourcing the Educator, and it can be found on Amazon. And it talks a lot about those relationship aspects to the teaching or the coaching, the teaching and coaching relationship, and regulation, self-regulation and co-regulation with the person that you're in relationship with. And there's a lot of mind-body practices in that. So that could be useful. So let's see, I told you my LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook. I have a business page. You could check that out. That's Susan Averna, PhD. So those places, yeah.
I'm so glad we got to talk and to meet in person. I enjoy our conversations when we talk on Facebook, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And can't wait to see everything that happens going forward, and where Trin goes as a school. Another connection there. My nephew actually went to Trinity, graduated in I'm going to say 2000, either 11 or 12. And that he's a PT now, but he did his undergrad at Trinity and was a wrestler there. So I feel connected that way also. Anyways, I can't wait to see what happens as you're, developing in the coaching wise as well. Coaching as a cheer coach, but in the psychology world also, because I think there's a big need, and I think it'll be very helpful going forward.
Yeah.
So.
And I love what you're doing too. It's a great synergy, or I don't know, they fit together so beautifully, the mind and the body, and obviously they influence each other. And so I'm trying to learn more about what you do, and so I'm glad we're connected, and who knows, maybe there'll be a partnership in the future.
I would love that. Yeah. I'm going to pick your brain after this. Actually, I'll pick your brain. We're going to have a conversation after this.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thanks everyone for listening today. If you enjoy this, please share it out. Let everyone know about Trinity College and Trinity College and Coach Susan. And let's help keep cheerleading.
Few Trinities out there. So we're Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut.
Sorry. Yep. So share this with somebody who needs it, and keep your athletes safe and healthy and on the mat. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out. Take life one step at a time. And as my friend Drew Kelleher said, you're responsible for your own vibes. So go get your own day. Go get the day.
Nice. Thank you so much, Laura.